Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sanseveri.
And Amy Cornell.
And so this is something that gets brought up a lot when I talk with authors. And Amy and I refer to it sometimes as cutting the line or tricking the system. And so we thought that it would make sense to do a show about the reasons that you are, how you decide to show up in the world with regards to, are you going to put the book up on Amazon? Are you going to form a publishing company? Because there's a lot of misunderstanding around what it means to start a publishing company versus just throwing the book up on Amazon or throwing it up on an Ingram Spark. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there around this too. And that's kind of why we thought it would be a good idea to do the show. And we talked about this, right, Amy? We talked about this a lot in the green room and how we were going to sort of tackle this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I'm glad that it was, I know you talked to somebody recently and had a very recent conversation with an author about this, and it wasn't the first time. And we were even saying that, okay, clearly this is starting to get around in author circles, that this might be the next new way to kind of cut the line or make strides. And when we say that, we don't necessarily mean it in a super derogatory way. Y'all want to be successful, and we support that 100%. And when we say cutting the line, usually our main focus on that is not wasting time or effort or money on things that aren't going to serve you,
Right.
So.
Exactly. And I think that, so this author, and I've heard this from multiple authors, is he wanted to start a publishing company. He wanted to start his own company and imprint so that he could distinguish himself from self-published authors when he was essentially still self-published. And his thinking was that if he did this, that bookstores and media would welcome him more readily than if he just was a KDP author, right? And the truth behind that is that that's a falsehood. That they will still know that because your ISBN tells the story, right? So your ISBN tells the story of how the book was published. But and I've talked to a lot of authors over the years who, and most recently, because there's so many options for publishing, who want to do this for the express purpose of trying to circumvent all of the issues that sometimes independently published books face. But here's the thing, though, with that is the obstacles that independent books face are largely due to the fact that they either aren't vetted, they're not edited, the covers are not great. It has nothing to do with the name, the publishing name on the book. Now, at the same time, and Amy, you talk about this because I know you talk to a lot of our authors too about branding. If it's a business decision to start a publishing company because that's going to be your brand, that's a different animal, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with, creating a publishing company for you to use to publish your books. If you've got a long-term plan, if you're going to be publishing a lot, if you're going to have multiple titles, and you're going to work that brand into your website, into your social media, I think that is 100% the right reason to go that route, because why not? You know what I mean? It gives you another element of professionalism at that point. But it's still entirely on you to present books to the world that don't look, I'm doing air quotes here, self-published, if we're going to use self-published as kind of as a derogatory term, which, we don't think that way, but people that kind of I don't want to look like I self-publish, so I'll create my own publishing name. You know what I mean? If that's why you're doing it, that's not what prevents your book from falling flat, like Penny said, because we see books all the time that have gone through boutique publishers and things like that are not primed for, retail success. Honestly, it happens all the time. And we've done shows on it, on things to look out for, questions to ask groups that you're working with and things like that. Need to go into all of that, but just putting a different name on it versus your own name, or like KDP, like Penny said, is not what makes a book successful.
Right, exactly. And I think that if I mean, I've never formed a publishing company, mostly because I, I just don't want the extra with everything else that we're doing with the business and that I'm doing with speaking and whatnot. I mean, I just don't, that for me, that's not a priority, right? Even knowing what I know about the industry, it's not a priority. The priority should be a quality book. And again, as Amy said, if it's a business decision, if it makes sense for you branding wise to do it, then, this is a business. Then I think that you should make that choice. And that is definitely something that maybe probably makes sense for you. But we talk a lot on this show about the things that distinguish you from the pack. And one of them generally isn't the publishing name on your book, right?
No. And Penny, think about all the shows, and especially for any of you that have been listening for a while, that we do on just very typical hurdles that authors face, and all the T's you have to cross and all the I's you have to dot and things like that. And so if you're, again, not to completely turn anybody off from this, if you're, you know what I mean, if you were thinking of going down that route, but you have to treat it very seriously. This is adding quite a few more items to your checklist, to your plate, that you need to then manage and be responsible for and follow through on. It's bigger than just that one title that you're looking to release. You know what I mean? This is
Right.
a whole other project that you have to really stay on top of and do all the right things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, like this, it's already challenging to compete in this industry. So really think it through and understand what's on your plate if you take this on. And I have to, Penny, I think we need to talk about who this matters to as well. Like, do you think nowadays readers and even a lot of influencers and things like that are hung up on publishing names anymore?
No, absolutely not. I cannot remember the last time that I ever heard somebody say, I only want to buy books from Simon and Schuster or whatever. I have not even, bigger media. I mean, if your book is good, if your book is relevant, if your book has some kind of a tie-in, having a publishing name on that book isn't gonna make any difference with that.
No, and think about influencers and things like that too.
Uh-uh. Yeah.
Like, no, but I know that some influencers prefer, traditionally published books and things like that. But if that's why you're doing this, also remember that those influencers and thought leaders are getting pitched thousands of traditionally published books, and
Yes.
a lot of schools are not going to get coverage either. So you just keep that in mind too, that putting a publisher name on your book is not automatic access to these people either.
Right.
There are lots of traditionally published books that don't get covered by influencers and thought leaders as well, just because there's only so many hours in the day, and their
Right.
TVs are so long. So that's another thing too. If you're doing it for some sort of status with media or whatever, there's so many other factors that they take into consideration that matter more. And bigger media, Penny, you and I talk about this all the time. They want to see that the book is resonating with your market at large.
Mhm.
Most
Yeah.
media will not stick their neck out to be the first person to say something's great. You know what I mean? Like, if you're getting coverage in media, it's because your book is already getting traction, and they know it's a sure thing because they want to give their listeners, readers, followers something that they know they'll like and they'll respond well to. So media don't go out on a limb for you. Like Penny already said, focusing on producing a solid product and getting that book out there and doing the proper marketing and things like that are going to make you stand out a lot more than that publisher name will.
Well, and I think that that's for this reason that authors a lot of times end up going through hybrid publishers, some of them who do great work, right? We've worked with a number of them that do really great work, but then some of them that have sort of shifty um, contracts, and they're very loosely tethered to the publishing industry, which never bodes well for the author. And so I think that in this conversation, we have there's a separate podcast that we did actually on hybrid publishers, but I think in this conversation it's worth mentioning that, because I talked to an author a couple of weeks ago, and this author said to me, I said, well, why are you with this, very unhappy with their publisher, really unhappy, doesn't like the covers at the publisher, like really just down the line, this publisher was not checking any of the boxes. And I said, why don't you leave this publisher for, your next book? And this author said, well, I like the cachet of having this publisher. And in that case, there really is no cachet, right? There's nothing that this publisher is bringing to the table that is going to elevate this author and shape this author in the way that is going to really benefit them, right? So you have to really consider why, as Amy said, start a publishing company if you want to start a publishing company, but you have to really ask yourself why. So again, if it's to cut the line or trick the system or whatever, that's right up there with those faking, Amazon bestseller lists, and waiting a year to promote a book and thinking that it's still new. And we get that too. Like, we get authors who say, well, I haven't done anything with my book in a year, so it's technically considered still new. And it's like, no, you can't, like, you literally can't trick this. It's really hard to trick the system. The benefits to forming a publishing company, and we're not going to go too far down the road on this, but when I've spoken for IBPA, a lot of those authors have small publishing houses. And if you go to any of these conferences, you really see how branded these publishing houses are, how focused they are. And sometimes the publishing houses are set up just to publish the author's books. And other times they start there and then they end up publishing other people's books, which for those of you listening may not be your objective at all. But you kind of see where how serious they have taken this, and they have vendor central accounts set up, and they have, relationships maybe with distributors and things like that. As Amy said, there's a lot of work that can go into this in order to do it right. Okay. And for me, for my personal decision, the majority of bookstores, even though I've had my book carried specifically in local Barnes and Nobles, the majority of bookstores are not going to stock books on book marketing because they're just not sexy. And also, I write a lot about Amazon, and bookstores oh, I hate Amazon so much. So, they're not going to stock a book on how to market your book on Amazon, because they're just middle finger Amazon, we don't want to stock you. So that's where, and it's also, for me personally, that's not really where I want to spend my time. Right? That's not where I want to spend my time. I want to get my book done. I want to get it out. I want to get it, and I want to put out a really good book. Now, if that ever changes, if I ever decide that I'm going to write something that is more commercial, right? Then maybe I would start a publishing company. But there are so many layers that go into being a publisher that you have to really decide if you're just doing it, as Amy said, cutting the line. I love that's her line, actually. I love that. If you're just doing it just to cut the line, you're going to be really disappointed.
Right. I agree.
And the other piece of this is that a lot of times authors think that because they form a publishing company that they can cut corners elsewhere, right? So, well, maybe I don't really need to spend that much time on my cover, or maybe I, whatever, because I'm a publishing company. And that's just not how it works. So start a company if you want to start a company. A lot of people do. Take a look at, because I'm not doing it this year, but I have 2 years in a row. I think I judged the Ben Franklin Awards from IBPA, and those publishers, the majority of books that I get through there, they have publishing companies that they've established. And these books are just the publishing company branding is beautiful. These books are all, they really, really have put in a lot of effort. And if you're ever curious about that, go to one of their events and sit down with a couple of publishers and just figure out what, goes into that. And it's a lot. There's a lot to do it right, I should say. There's a lot of effort that goes into that.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, I think we've covered everything, right? Did we cover everything that we had outlined that we talked about in the green room?
Yeah, no, we did. We covered it all. We hit all of our key points. I mean, and you're right. Like, you're really not going to get treated any differently based on your publisher name alone. You
Yeah.
know, what
Yeah.
you do around it. It's all the other shows that we do. It's those kind of things that matter. So, but I'm glad we covered this because I find it so interesting and I love getting insight into what is being discussed in author circles, and on
Yes.
Reddit and in author communities about kind of the next thing that seems to be working or that people are considering or that might be, the next like cool option in terms of building your brand. And so I really appreciate it when authors bring that to our attention too when you chat with them, Penny, because I love being able to discuss it on the show here.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that totally. I love to get feedback from authors. I mean, that's a lot of our shows, as you know, are inspired by that. And I want to just mention, I want to give a shout out again to the new reviews that we have on iTunes. Amy took a couple of them and put them on social media. So we're always willing to give you equally give you props and thank yous and whatnot. We shout it from the rooftops whenever we get reviews. Please share this show with somebody that you think could benefit from it, or share it with your writers group, even better. We're always so excited to present, content to you, and we're open to show ideas. So if you have an idea and you think, oh, I'd really love for them to cover this, let us know. Shoot us over an email. A lot of our shows that we've done have been based on listener recommendations. So we love that. And just got the covers in. Once we hop off this, I'm going to get Amy's opinion on them for the Amazon Author Formula workbook, which I'm super excited about. That's coming out very soon. So very, very exciting 2025, and glad that we are here for our 5th year of doing this podcast. It's amazing. I know, right? It's so crazy. So thank you again so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.